Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Join in the conversation. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Send a recorded talkback message on the free Central Florida Public Media app. Leave a voicemail by calling 407-273-2300, extension 246. Engage is made possible with the support of listeners like you.
You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up, technology addiction among teens and children. We discuss diagnosis and digital intervention. Also, one small step to find common ground during times of political division. And
just a jump to the left.
A performance of a quintessential cult classic for Halloween tonight in Central Florida. A local Rocky Horror Shadowcast explains the experience and appeal of the show. But first, important news to get to now. This is our last Engage show before Election Day. As Floridians fill out the ballot, they'll weigh in on federal and state races, judicial offices, local candidates, constitutional amendments, and county charter questions. Supporters of the last item on the ballot in Orange County are concerned that voter fatigue could threaten its success. It asks about a half-cent sales tax referendum for public schools that pays for construction, renovation, and maintenance, as well as improvements for school technology and safety. The current half-cent sales tax expires at the end of 2025. If it isn't extended by voters, the school system could be looking at a $4 billion revenue shortage for expenses. Dick Batchelor is chairman of the Change for Kids campaign, an effort he created in 2002 to garner community support for the half-penny sales tax in Orange County. He joined Engage to talk about the referendum that is getting bipartisan support. I began the discussion by asking Batchelor who pays this sales tax.
Tourists pay half the tax because it's a sales tax, and tourists pay half the sales tax. So if you look at all the taxes raised by the half a penny, again, half are paid by the tourist.
Is the money only used for building? Are there other things within the school that pays for as well?
It can be primarily for building, but also IT, wiring, technology, that kind of thing, and some security measures, but the vast amount of money goes to actually school construction.
So what would happen if this does not pass?
If it does not pass, the school board will be short $4 billion in construction money over the next 10 years, which means there are a great number of schools they cannot remodel, they cannot rebuild, they cannot build new. If you look at the schools that were built with a half a penny of sales tax in 2003, that's over 20 years ago. So those schools are now being rotated for repairs because it's been new roofs, new air conditioning units, whatever it might be. So the school board has no money for this. They get no money from the state. So this half a penny sales tax is the only money they can use to build schools, air condition schools, put in some IT provisions, that type of thing.
Okay. Have you seen the Florida legislature decreasing funding then for school district building and maintenance programs? Is that kind of making up for that?
The legislature has not only been supportive of public education, in my opinion, but if you look at it very specifically, they transferred about $2 billion in operating money out of the school system statewide. Of the 67 school districts, they basically cut their budget for operations, hiring teachers, et cetera, by $2 billion in one legislative session. So they're not by any means going to put any money for construction of new schools or rebuilding.
And you mentioned that if this revenue isn't extended, Orange County Public Schools are going to be short $4 billion.
Yes.
That's kind of a hard figure to wrap your head around.
Right.
Where would they get the money otherwise?
They wouldn't. There'd be new schools that won't be built. There will be old schools that won't be repaired. And so I'm fairly confident because we passed this. In 2003, we passed it by about 56% of the vote, which is good for a tax, very good. In 2014, we passed it by 58 or 59%. I feel very confident. The reason I feel confident is because the voters see all these new schools. They see the 36 new schools or repaired schools, 75 brand new schools, and they see all these repairs so in their neighborhood. So throughout Orange County, you cannot go very far without seeing a new elementary school, middle school, or a high school. So I think the best testament that the taxpayers look for is if I'll give you the half a penny sales tax for schools, but what are you done with it? And I think there's enough evidence around with all new schools in every neighborhood throughout Orange County that I think there will be a lot of support. The one thing we have to be aware of is that it's the last issue on the ballot. You know, you've got everything from president down to local elections. Then you've got 4 state constitutional amendments, and you've got 10 local charter amendments. So it's the last one, and we're afraid of what we call voter fatigue. They'll get halfway down the ballot and said, I can't do all of this, and leave the ballot. So what we say last on the ballot, first in your heart. Last on the ballot, first in your heart. Stay. If you have to skip some ballot measures because you just don't understand them, don't want to vote for them, or just skip them and go straight to the bottom of the ballot.
Yeah, how do you get this issue to stand out and not get lost among all the things you just mentioned?
Well, fortunately, we've had enough money to do some direct mail, a number of pieces of direct mail, some social media, some billboards that were donated. So we've gotten the word out. What we call the super voters, the people most likely to vote. Those are the people who voted in the last 2 presidential elections are most likely to vote. So we're able to target those voters and get the word out. So we feel confident about it. But you never can want to be too overconfident. We need the support of the voters. And again, this half a penny sales tax, half paid by tourists, will raise $4 billion for new schools.
What do you say to people who would say, I don't have kids, this is not something I want to spend money on?
Good point. Most people do have children, or they have grandchildren, they have nieces and nephews in the public school system. Most people do. But here's another thing. Politically, somebody might say, I'm an economic conservative. Why will I vote for a tax? Well, for the first time since we've been doing this, the Republican Party has endorsed the half a penny sales tax. So it's been endorsed by the Democratic Party and then Republican Party for the very first time. So it's a bipartisan issue. And I think the conservatives look at it from an economic impact. If you spend $4 billion, if you look at what they call econometric modeling, that's about a $6 billion impact. It creates about 1,300 construction jobs year-round in Orange County. So I think for those who might look at it with a little bit of trepidation, oh, wait a minute, it's $4 billion, half of it's paid by the tourists that build schools, and by the way, it creates all these jobs, so well-paying jobs too in the school construction industry.
And a question for you about the wording of the amendment. It says it's a renewal. Mm-hmm. Does that mean there is no additional tax? Is it maintain status quo, or is it a change?
It's a very good question. And we intentionally said renewal because we did not want people to think it's a new tax, because it's not a new tax. It was passed in 2003, and the extension was passed in 2014. So this is the 3rd extension, but it's not a new tax. It's just an extension of an existing tax.
And what else does our audience need to understand as they make their way to the ballot box and see this? I
would say the thing that I would keep top of mind, we go back to the kids. The kids in Orange County, public schools kids, deserve to be taught in a safe and secure environment. And prior to the half a penny being passed in 2003, we literally had schools falling down. There were 138 schools initially on the list that had to be replaced or repaired to a great degree. So think about that. Had we not had the public support for that half a penny, there were 138 schools that would not have been built, not have been replaced. But keep in mind, portables were a big problem. We had so many kids in these old portables. We've been able to reduce that by 75%. So go back to the kids. Do the kids deserve a safe learning environment? And the answer is yes, and we hope the voters say yes.
Dick Batchelor is chairman of the Change for Kids campaign to generate support for the half-penny sales tax that benefits Orange County schools. There's more ahead here on Engage. Are social media and generative artificial intelligence like digital drugs? We'll talk to the director of UCF's Counseling and Psychological Services about dependence and addiction. If you miss any part of our show today, you can always subscribe to the Engage podcast and listen when it's convenient for you. The program will be available on demand at cfpublic.org. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, the Rocky Horror Picture Show is a legendary staple of American cult cinema. But what happens when a campy film classic about cross-dressing meets a state law banning drag?
Obviously, the punk rock answer is to be like, yeah, it doesn't matter, we're going to keep doing it. But on a logistical level, this is a cast of all volunteers. We don't want our actors getting in trouble.
We'll talk with the Rich Weirdos, the region's Rocky Horror Theater Company. But first, as our reliance on mobile devices is growing, there are concerns among parents that dependence is escalating to an addiction for their children. Last week on Engage, we discussed a lawsuit filed by Megan Garcia, the mother of Orlando teen Sewell Setzer. It states he died by suicide after developing an addiction to artificial intelligence chatbots. Many people are hardwired to associate addiction with habits like drug abuse, alcoholism, or gambling. The American Psychological Association defines it as a state of psychological or physical dependence on the use of substances or activities or behaviors. Dr. Karen Hoffman is a licensed psychologist and director of counseling and psychological services at UCF. She joined Engage earlier today to discuss social media and generative AI in the context of addiction. I asked Dr. Hoffman to identify the similarities between the brain's chemical reaction to substance consumption and its response to social media use.
When you think about social media and phone use, it gives us pleasure and it stimulates the same pleasure areas in the brain that any kind of alcohol, drug use does. And so that's what makes it very addictive. It is triggering the dopamine every time you go into your social media, every time you are looking at something on your phone. And we've become very dependent on our phones. So it's hard to get away from something that can consume our attention.
We're thinking about that response to the reward feeling, the effect of the drug, the risk of gambling. Is that the same reward people derive while using social media?
I think one thing is that if you look at addiction as a whole, it is also a way to manage or reduce or totally get away from intense or negative emotion. If we're bored, if we're sad, if we're angry. So whether we're using drugs or alcohol or the phone to not deal with the discomfort of our intense emotion. The addictive part of this, and we see this in like gambling and slot machines, there is an intermittent reinforcement, which means that we get a reward intermittently and it becomes very addictive. So when we're scrolling, we may not like everything or we're looking at different photos and it might not give us what we're looking for, but then we connect with something. We like a video, looking at puppies, looking at some information and looking at what our friends are doing. And so it's triggering that dopamine effect that we're getting something out of it, but it's not a constant. It is intermittently being reinforced, which makes it one of the hardest things to reduce because that is a very addictive way of being reinforced. And that's what we see also in gambling.
I want to ask you about AI specifically. There are chatbots where users interact and have a conversation more or less with that artificial intelligence. Is there something especially addictive about that specific social interaction?
Well, yes, I think what makes these AI and chat boxes also so enticing is that as human beings, we are hardwired to connect. And right now we have a generation of disconnection and loneliness. And so we're seeking out any form of connection. And this is what makes social media also very compelling, is that it gives us a form or a sense of connection. But having an interaction with a chat box or some AI gives us also this other deeper form of sense of connection and may make it difficult to interact with another human being who is much more unpredictable than maybe a chat bot or any kind of AI, which are going to give us responses that we're looking for and we're needing, which may not be what a true interaction is really about. And so it might be easier, especially if I'm somebody who suffers from social anxiety or any kind of anxiety, that's going to be a safer way for me to engage in some kind of social interaction or connection.
Are you seeing or have you seen students within counseling and psychological services with a type of unhealthy preoccupation with this technology, whether it be AI or social media?
I'm not sure we've seen it translated into AI per se in that way, or we haven't seen it in the counseling center yet. But we assume that most students or people are engaging in some kind of social media and that they're probably could be using it, or we assess how are they using it, if they're using it in doses or if they're using it as a way to not deal with their feelings or their issues, whatever it is, because we know that using social media can make depression and anxiety worse. If you see your friends living their best life and you're already feeling isolated, it's going to make you feel worse about yourself. It's going to impact your self-esteem. It's going to make you feel more anxious about getting out in the world and connecting with friends or making friends, or just feeling more depressed because you're not living the life that you're seeing in these Instagram posts, which we know are, not what the reality is. What people are feeling in a photo is not always what they're really feeling in real life.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of posts online about how horrible someone's day went or just how difficult something was. It's usually rainbows and butterflies that we see online.
Exactly. And so then it sets up, especially if you're a younger person and you believe that's what real life is, you're going to feel a big contrast of, well, I'm really struggling here. Why can't I live that life? Why don't I have as many friends as I see in these pictures that my friends are having? And so it really is causing, I think, especially younger people, younger students, to feel like they're inadequate in some way.
So as we're talking about these real life consequences, what kind of treatment is being discussed for this?
Well, you would imagine that we encourage people to take social media breaks, phone breaks. It's really difficult. Just like you would say, don't pick up a drink, don't use drugs. Whatever your addiction is, don't go place a bet on your favorite team. And that's, I think, what makes it challenging is that we need our phones. Students, it's incorporated in their schooling or a way to connect with their friends. So it would be very, very difficult to be able to take a break, but that's the only way that you're going to see what comes up or see what your challenge is. Being able to go out in nature, socializing in person. I think that's really what's missing is many, many people, many students are just scared of interacting with other people because they feel awkward, or if there's a moment they don't know what to say. And so they kind of use their phone as a way or an excuse to connect but not connect. So definitely trying to do things more in person. And we're finding that students actually want to be seen in person in counseling. 87% of our students prefer counseling in person, and which is something that we didn't really foresee. We thought, oh, the flexibility of telehealth is something that students are going to like. And for some, it is very convenient, but I think students are really liking the more in-person connections, being live at a football game, being live at organization meeting or a party. And what somebody might realize is that they are feeling those withdrawal symptoms. You know you have a problem if you start feeling angry or irritated or restless or can't sleep because you don't have your phone or you haven't checked social media. Those are kind of the warning signs. Maybe being able to turn off your phone at night or putting it on silent so you're not kind of hearing the beeps or go off. Being able to relax and really go out and maybe, relax your body, taking yoga or, again, just nature walks, being disconnected from your phone in some way is the best way to be able to not depend on your phone in that way.
Dr. Hoffman, how do you talk about addiction and technology? Meaning, we're hardwired to think about addiction to alcohol, addiction to drugs, but not everyone drinks. Not everyone uses drugs. Everyone uses technology. Is it as accepted as an addiction as much as alcohol or gambling is?
Well, I think if you ask a student, are you addicted to your phone? I think all of them would say yes, and maybe in a joking way. Maybe being on your phone or social media doesn't have these intense consequences that you might see when somebody is addicted to drugs or alcohol. But I do think that students can connect with a lack of concentration or not being able to sit still or having to constantly check on their phone. And so I think they could assess themselves that they probably know they're more dependent on their phone than they would like to be. So I do think it's accepted, but probably not taken as seriously, certainly as alcohol or drugs, which, I think there can be major consequences with alcohol or drugs, like in one event. I mean, accidents happen. So I know that in some way the consequences of maybe being addicted to your phone are more slow rolling impact, where failing grades, a lack of friends, being kind of isolating yourself, spending many, many hours on your phone, and then you're not doing anything else. You're not productive in any way. Those are probably the things that would stand out to somebody if, they're engaging in phone use way too much, that it's impacting their life in a negative manner. We might not think that we need counseling for it. And a lot of times the overuse of phone and social media might be hiding another bigger mental health issue. And so I would say if you're struggling with giving your phone a break, I think it might help if you just seek treatment and see what other things might be going on that a person may be avoiding due to phone use and overuse of social media.
Dr. Karen Hoffman is a licensed psychologist and director of counseling and psychological services at UCF. This year, Central Florida Public Media and StoryCorps have been bringing together strangers with differing political views for a guided conversation. It's a program called One Small Step. We're joined now by Abe Abaraya, producer for Central Florida Public Media and facilitator for these conversations. Thanks for being here, Abe.
Absolutely.
Hey, can you set up this conversation that we're going to hear?
So this morning, we're going to hear from two Melbourne residents. We have Tom Unrath, and he's a retired Air Force chaplain and pastor. And you might recognize his voice. So since he's done this One Small Step interview, he's done a voter panel with Central Florida Public Media, and he's been interviewed about medical marijuana and some other issues as well. So his voice might be a little bit familiar to listeners of Central Florida Public Media. Now, he spoke with Danny Combs, and she's a former evangelical turned agnostic, which is part of why we matched him up. And she used to be really involved in the church, and her husband serves in the military, so there's a lot of overlap there. And one of the things that I wanted to do is play a little bit of tape here because Danny talked a little bit about why she wanted to do this conversation during it, and I thought that was a really good setup for this.
I really wanted to go into this next election cycle not feeling as angry as I did the last time. Because I feel like I did shut a lot of people out and I didn't have a lot of good conversations like this that I probably could have. I had a lot of opportunity to, and that does make me a little sad that I missed out on that. And I think what I have really taken away from today was a big reminder that even though you think you are different from someone else, there's so many more common denominators than we let ourselves think. And when we let go of all our preconceived notions we have of groups and people and ages and all the things, when we let go of all that and we just sit down and talk, that's where the magic happens in humanity, I feel like. Mm-hmm. And I think I really I knew that, but I think I was just not listening to that. So I feel like that was such a good reminder for me.
Now let's take a listen to the full story. And just a warning, this conversation discusses grief and suicide.
My name is Danny Combs. I am 43 years of age.
Hi, my name is Tom Unrath. I am 69 years old. We're having this recording in Melbourne, Florida.
I really wanted to do this interview today because I feel like human connection is really struggling these days. I am the parent of a preteen and a teenager, and I feel like all the time we spend on screens and texting and on social media and one-sided algorithms has made it really hard for people of all generations just to connect.
Well, much like you, I've seen the divisions that are happening within the world, and in so many ways. I want to help people to understand that we need each other. Mm-hmm. We need to work together.
Tell me about one or two people in your life who have had the biggest influence on you, and what did they teach you?
I'm going to give one that's probably the hardest answer, and that's my daughter. Nicole died in a car accident. Oh. She was on the way from Tampa over here to visit September 5th, 2003. The things that she taught me are to love without withholding anything, to care for everybody, to always smile, to hug people as often as possible. She taught me that love lives on among people well beyond death.
So thank you I know it's not easy to talk about people we love so much that left. I think another person, which I didn't get to know much in their time here on Earth, was my own dad, who passed away. He took his own life when I was 11. And he made an impact on my life in realizing how important it is to really pay attention to people when they say, "How are you doing?" He was really extroverted, and he had a huge personality. I get a lot of my personality traits from him. He was a great masker of what his internal battles. And when he died, there was so much stigma associated with suicide and people even just talking about it. He comes from a very strong Christian background. I had family members of his tell me he went to hell when I was 11. That was very hard. So I think because I know how much to a snowball effect happens when you lose someone in that way, that it's so important to me to be involved in mental health awareness and talking about mental health struggles openly. And also, when I was involved in church, I thought that was huge in a church setting as well, to talk about mental health and to make sure people are aware that that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you can't be your full self. Could you briefly describe in your own words your personal political values?
We should take care of each other and find ways to do that. Whether coming at it from a libertarian point of view or Green Party point of view or Republican or Democrat, whether a person considers him or herself conservative or liberal,
Right.
There are so many different issues.
Yes, correct.
There's financial, there's social, there's religious. If you want to be conservative financially, which I think myself to be, there's also a part of me that says, okay, now that I understand this whole financial thing, there's still people that need to be cared for.
I'm not on the same page as you with faith beliefs anymore, but I do agree that our job is to care for the planet while we're here. I feel like we are supposed to care for each other. It's interesting because before we started our interview and we were told we have different political views, the way you were describing your personal views is kind of the same. I would say something very similar. I think when I go to vote, whether it's for an election or a policy or school board things, anything, I also think, how is this going to affect the greater good? It's not just about my personal interest. I think when we do get lost, a lot of times what we're seeing on our screen is catered exactly to us. And it's easy to think that our way is the only way to think. And that kind of brings us full circle to how we started this conversation and to why this is so important. Sitting down and talking to people who you think you don't have a lot in common with, but then you talk more and you realize we all have a lot more connection than we think we do. Yeah. Correct.
Well, I've learned that I think I have a new friend.
Oh, I love that.
That was a really open, raw conversation, Abe. Did you know they had this overlapping connection over loss?
I absolutely did not. So I had talked to Tom about his personal story with that prior to it during some of the screenings. So I knew that that was there. That was something he'd put in his bio. And it's obviously something that, over the years he's gotten pretty comfortable talking about. And so when that question comes up, it's sort of a, who are some of your biggest influences? That one, I did not see that answer coming. And I didn't know Danny's story at all. So, it's just one of those things where Tom kind of opened up about it, and then that had Danny open up about it. And then they had sort of this wonderful kind of overlap with there. And this is one of those ones that happened kind of early in the conversation, and I think that helped kind of guide it the rest of the way through, where they had a little bit of that shared experience and were able to kind of bond over it. And it was really interesting to see it, too, because I was a little bit worried pairing up someone who, was that involved in faith and ministry with someone who used to be involved with it. But it turned out to work out really well, and I think a lot of it just worked out because of that dynamic there.
So these have been really just fascinating to listen to. What's coming down the pipeline for One Small Step?
So we are coming close to an election, but that does not mean that we are stopping the running through the end of the year with this. So we do have a few more conversations that we're editing right now that we're going to get to air hopefully in the coming weeks here, and then we'll be running through the end of the year. So we also have an event coming up December 7th. We're still working out some of the details on that, but we hope to have bring together some of the people who've done the conversations and some of the people who might be interested in this kind of a project.
Abe Abaraya is producer and facilitator for One Small Step Conversations. Thank you for being with us, Abe.
Thanks again.
Coming up, it's astounding, time is fleeting, madness takes its toll. And Rocky Horror fans will gather tonight at the Plaza Live for the Halloween performance of everybody's favorite film about transvestite aliens. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. The Rocky Horror Picture Show tells the story of young couple Brad and Janet, who stumble upon the spooky, scary mansion of Dr. Frankenfurter on a dark and stormy night after experiencing a flat tire. It's hard to summarize the plot from there, but what follows is a mix of rock and roll and theatrics that defines the cult classic.
Don't get strung up by the way I look. Don't judge a book by its cover. I'm not much of a man by the light of day, but by night I'm one hell of a lover. I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania.
It's so exemplary in its cultural and historical significance that the Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry. The 1975 film still is screened and performed today. Valerie Voss is the co-director for The Rich Weirdos, a Rocky Horror shadowcast that acts out the movie as it runs on the big screen. They have a special Halloween performance at the Plaza Live in Orlando tonight. Valerie joined Engage to discuss the longevity and appeal of the immersive, interactive experience.
We are a Rocky Horror shadowcast, which means we act out the movie as the movie plays. We started in just doing movie theaters, but now we perform in like large theaters all across Central Florida. Like regularly, we're at Plaza Live, Fringe Art Space, the Ritz in Sanford. And it's a fully immersive, interactive experience. So we'll have people, taking part by throwing props and dressing up and yelling things at the screen.
It's a weird movie, and there's really no cohesive plot. Why is it so resonant with people after nearly 50 years?
It's pretty interesting because I think it started as such a exploratory piece of like queer media that wasn't super popular at the time. I don't think there was that much representation. The stage show itself came out in 1970, I believe, and it came out like very shortly after being gay stopped being illegal in the UK. So it was kind of a response to that. And then obviously the movie got made and there wasn't that much mainstream queer representation at the time. They put the movie at midnight because they thought it was going to flop. And it really resonated with people and people started going. And that's kind of where it grew its cult following. So now, while I see a lot of younger generations, myself included, getting involved and being like, this isn't necessarily the best representation of what, our culture's relationship with being queer is today. In a lot of ways, it's still such a piece of history that everyone, parents bring their kids, people love to bring people have never seen it before. Like, it's such a shared experience that is really just, a part of our culture, which is so nice.
Can you talk about the first time you saw the Rocky Horror Picture Show and what you love about it?
I saw it in high school and I had a friend. It was one of those things that I had never heard of it. And I had a friend that was like, I can't believe you've never seen this, because her parents had shown it to her. My parents aren't like musical theater people. And they were like, I can't believe you've never seen this. So she showed it to me. And I just fell in love. Immediately, I fell in love with the music. I fell in love with the story. There's something like, there's obviously a sexual nature to it, but it's also very campy and it's funny. And again, the music is just, I really fell in love with the music. So I sat with it for a couple of years. And then once I was old enough, I went to a live showing, and it's just a completely different experience than watching the movie. There's something so communal about it that I was like, oh, like, I get it. Like, we all really love this movie, but we also really love the experience of loving this movie together.
Yeah. Can you talk more about just the participation in this film? I can't think of anything else like it that exists where the audience or the performers are so involved.
Oh, no, absolutely. Like, it's a cult, like, I want to say it's the staple cult classic. It because of it being pushed to those midnight showings, the people that wanted to see it had to make a point to see it. Like, the active participation was a choice, and it was something that people wanted. And on the surface level, it just seems like people really don't like the movie because, you're yelling all these callback lines and you're being involved with these things. You're poking fun at the movie, but also the people that are doing all these callbacks are the people that come and see it every single show and have seen it for years because they love it.
So it's kind of like you're describing a rite of passage for some people. What kind of reaction do you get from people who see it for the first time?
It's so sweet. I think people that are seeing it for the first time, it's a bit of a shock and they don't really know what they just saw because there's so much to take in. I have friends that will come to see it and I'm like, you have to watch the movie on your own first and then come see the show. Because if you want to follow the plot, don't do it while someone's yelling at the screen. But I'm like, watch the movie at home and then come see the show and see, how people love it. And I think it's, the love people have for it is why people inherently love it, which is nice and very cyclical. But for someone that's watching it for the first time, like there's so much to love because it's really good at storytelling, which is funny because it's such a silly movie, but it does a very good job of telling a pretty simple story, but through music and with fun costumes. It has a really good cast. And then you come see it live and you get to see not only that, but you also get to see all the like added in jokes and stuff like that, which just elevates the whole experience.
Have you ever had an experience that was just too over the top from a performer or audience member?
Okay, yeah. So at one of our most recent shows, I don't think this was super bad or anything, but it's fresh in my mind as one time that the entire cast broke on stage. During the film, there's a scene called Dinner Scene where all the characters sit down and are engaging in a dinner together. And as soon as it starts, it's a transition scene for us. So our actors were getting set up, everyone was getting ready to sit down, and it was a relatively quiet part of the film, which doesn't happen often because everyone always has something to say. And one person with their full chest yelled, "They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs." And everyone on stage just broke character and started laughing because it was just, you get desensitized to what you hear because you hear the same things over and over and over. And someone in the audience just threw that one out at us and we were all completely caught off guard. And it was so funny. And it was like just such a genuine moment of like, this is why this film has longevity and this is why this experience has longevity, because there's always something that you can throw in there to make it topical that keeps it fresh.
Actually, that makes me, on a serious note, did you have any concerns in 2023 when the state passed what was called by critics as the anti-drag bill? Did that have any impact?
Absolutely. Thankfully, we have moved past it for most of our venues. We've been able to, accommodate and stuff, but it did force us to evaluate the show. And unfortunately, because the bill was written so vaguely, it made things even more difficult for us because what constitutes as drag? We didn't know what was okay and what we didn't like. Obviously, the punk rock answer is to be like, yeah, it doesn't matter, we're going to keep doing it. But on a logistical level, this is a cast of all volunteers. We don't want our actors getting in trouble. We don't want anyone having to deal with that. We are all people with jobs outside of this. So we didn't want anyone getting in trouble or getting hurt. So we were trying to figure out logistically what it meant because it was so vague. Previously in the past, we've done shows outside, and now we are more apprehensive to that. Even if the bill's been lifted, there is a target on our back that wasn't there when I started this in the beginning of 2016, and that's pretty unfortunate.
Why do you keep doing it?
I love it. I love the people. I love the crowd. For me, Personally, I enjoy the organizational aspect of it. I enjoy managing, and I enjoy giving people a space to keep doing it. For me, as I've grown as a performer and as I've grown as a director, and I've become more of a theater person all around, it started as an opportunity for me to perform and to take part in something that I wasn't having the opportunity to do elsewhere. And even as those opportunities have begin to come into my life, Rocky's always something that I want to be involved with and I want to protect, because I want other people to have that opportunity that I so desperately needed back in 2016.
And tell me a little bit just about your performance. I'm guessing Halloween is a big time of year for you all.
Yes, Halloween is our biggest time. It's pretty nice. We've been busy this whole October. We used to perform year round at Universal City Walk, and we had struggled to find a permanent venue for a very long time. I'm happy to share that we now have a regular venue at Fringe Art Space, and we'll be doing shows there quarterly. But prior to moving into those quarterly shows, we started doing summer shows, because summer shows are always really popular. And then our busy season starts up in September and runs through October, early November.
Valerie Voss is the co-director for The Rich Weirdos. You can catch tonight's performance of the Rocky Horror Picture Show at the Plaza Live in Orlando. Doors open at 7 o'clock. Thank you for spending part of your Halloween with us here on Engage. We are back on Tuesday for Election Day. All of our shows are available on demand at cfpublic.org. I'm Sharon Stone. Thanks for joining us. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.